Hey Trey.
How's it going?
Good man, how are you?
Doing good.
Can you give us the real quick Trey Hensley rundown, like who you are and how you got started with guitar in the first place?
Sure. Yeah. So I started playing guitar when I was 10, as most people would. I've always been into bluegrass. It's always been my kind of forte. I grew up in not necessarily a musical family. My dad played banjo when I was a kid, but he, never really excelled. But I remember him being good, but he just at a certain point, he was also a car mechanic. So when he would get home, I'm sure did not feel like playing the banjo and learning new material. But I did grow up hearing music, and like I said, although wasn't necessarily a musical family, music was a big part of it. And grew up, spent a lot of time with my granddad, who had a nice record collection and a lot of kind of things that make sense now that it's like a Doc Watson, Flat and Scruggs, a lot of traditional country stuff, Hank Williams and George Jones. And so I've always just been drawn to music. I went to a bluegrass festival when I was 10, saw a couple of the greats in bluegrass music that actually played the guitar. I grew up in the 90s, in the era of the country music strummers, and when I got to see somebody take a guitar solo in person was kind of my big lightning bolt moment. Yeah, and then it's just been kind of hitting the ground running from there. I played the Opry about a year after I started playing the guitar, with thanks to Marty Stewart, and it's just been snowballing for the past 2 decades.
So it sounds like, you played the Opry a year after you started playing guitar. You were kind of like entrenched in that world already. Would you say that like you identified or called yourself like a flat pick guitar player right from the very beginning, or when you picked it up, were you more just like, I want to play the guitar and I want to shred and like play rock music, or were you always like,
Oh
I
no,
want to be a flat picker, I want to do that?
it was 100% flat picker when I first started. It wasn't until you know a few years later in the teenage years that I got into shredder world and rock and metal guitar and everything that was outside of my original box that I'd sort of put myself in. And yeah, it's I've always just really been intrigued by music, and I've always wanted to expand upon my own playing, expand upon my own knowledge. We only get so many years to be here, so it's like I just love music so much that I want to be able to listen to as much as I can, take from as much as I can, and somehow, whether it be direct or indirect, let it influence my musical choices and playing and all that good stuff.
Cool. And if you could briefly, for again, like for the few uninitiated who remain, I know I've had this conversation with a lot of people here at the Music Emporium. Flat picking. It sounds kind of generic to the more casual guitar player, let's say.
Yeah.
If you could sort of briefly describe what comes to mind for you, or what is meant by flat picking, and then as maybe another way to shed light on that subject, who's on your Mount Rushmore for flat pick guitar players? Like, who's your top three or four? The artists that somebody who might want to get into that style or genre, like you have to know these people.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a very broad question. I do feel like the term flat picking. I wish there was a different term for it, just because
Mm.
it can be pretty generic. In the way that everybody that plays with a flat pick is a flat picker.
Right. Yeah.
So you've got George Benson in the same camp as all these metal guitarists that just happen to use a pick.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there's a great Tony Rice interview from the '80s where he's on Ralph Emery's show, and country music, sort of a legendary host that would ask somewhat bad questions. And he mentioned something. It wasn't particularly what is flat picking, but I think he said, what is a flat pick,
Ah.
which
Yeah.
and Tony just handed him a pick, and it was like, it's flat, it's a pick. And I get that sort of vibe from flat picking, where it's like, yes, but no. It's to me, like, I just happen to have my guitar here. like flat picking, that style is a very it's more of a not necessarily like synchronized, but it's more of a like the style that I think of is very single note line on an acoustic instrument. A lot of like fiddle tune based things. Like in a general sense, you know, if you listen to the early Doc Watson, that sort of defines flat picking. So any of the stuff that's kind of like fiddle tuney, that's all what I would consider flat picking. You know, like my general term of it, that the way that I incorporate it is like all this alternate picking stuff. So you know, a lot of down up down kind of things going on.
Yep.
Like I said, it's so general that it's almost ambiguous to put a definition to it. And within bluegrass there's so many different styles of it. As far as like a Mount Rushmore, it would not be complete without Doc, because I think there's a, you know, pre-Doc world and a post-Doc world, and in the same way that I would put Tony up there, because you know, Tony Rice, there's a pre-Tony Rice world and a post-Tony Rice world, and I think we're still in that world. You know, it's like Tony changed everything, you know, after him, and I don't think there's a guitar player in bluegrass and acoustic guitar that's playing that wasn't, whether they know it or not, but most of them know it, that they weren't influenced by Tony. So Doc and Tony are definitely have to be on there. I would put in the modern era Brian Sutton would definitely be on there, and honestly it wouldn't be complete without Clarence. So Doc, Tony, Clarence, and Brian are kind of on my Mount Rushmore of bluegrass acoustic guitar players.
That's a pretty good Mount Rushmore. Like, yeah, I always think of it, it's like I can even hear it when you pick up your guitar and play Black Mountain Rag for 2 seconds. It's like, you know, all flat pickers, well, you're playing rhythm like 95% of the time, but then when you play, you know, your break, your solo, whatever, the eighth note-y kind of stuff, I think what people who hear it and then get impressed by is that, like, it's actually the guitar kind of propelling the band at that moment, and acoustic guitars so rarely do that. So flat picking has this like association now with being like some kind of pyrotechnics, but it's like, to me it's still rhythmic, because it's like that the guitar is still driving the band right there. And for a lot of people who I think have grown to be, you know, fans of that style more recently, like, you might be on that Mount Rushmore for a lot of people who are younger players now. And, you know, you've won IBMA Guitar Player of the Year 2 times now, right? I mean, what does that mean to you, like, when you hear that and, you know, get that kind of recognition from your peers?
It is amazing. I mean, I myself would never consider it, you know, but it's just because I hear what I play and I'm never satisfied with it, you know. I'm always working on it, and I've always just been inspired by music, and it goes back to the listening thing, you know. It's like it's almost overwhelming in that there's only so much time to learn as much as you can. And so I feel like I want to just improve on my guitar playing. And this year, you know, just to be on the list of, you know, the IBMA guitar players is already incredible. And I never consider it that it's, you know, I never take that for granted, but I also never consider that I might actually win it. And, you know, so it's exciting for the moment. But the very next day, it's like I just want to get better, and I want to improve upon what I did the day before. And, you know, I still have that fire that I had when I was a kid, and I still get inspired by the guitar. And you know, I hear a lot of people, and I you know, teach occasionally and hear, you know, people talk about getting burnt out, and I have felt that way about certain parts of maybe my profession, you know, the touring or the traveling, or even singing. It's like or writing. There's things that I will go through these little spells where I'll have a hang up. But knock on wood, you know, I've never felt that with guitar. I always feel like, even if I'm not super inspired that day, I just always have a love for playing the guitar. And you know, I'm thankful for that, because it's like you kind of find this thing that you really enjoy doing. And you know, that's been the guitar for me, for sure.
Well, So coming up in this world, being around guitars for so long, um, I'm sure you've been going to jams, festivals, yada yada yada, since you were really young, and maybe I'm going out on a limb, maybe I'm not. You probably didn't see a lot of tailors at those kinds of environments, coming
Yeah.
up. I'm going on my own experience, but maybe generalizing a little bit. I don't know if you had the same experience, but it kind of made me wonder, like, um, why a tailor for you? Like, how did
Yeah.
you first become aware of them, and what draws you to it now, especially since its presence is like maybe a little bit of an outlier in that kind of community?
I became introduced to Taylor probably around 2013 when I moved to Nashville, and I was sort of transitioning from playing over a microphone to plugging in,
Hmm.
and a friend of mine, this great guitar player in East Tennessee, Chelsea Constable, had just kind of told me that you should check out these Taylor guitars. They're making great stuff, and I have a friend that works at the showroom, and so I went over there, and I ended up getting a 510,
Oh,
and so this was like I said 2013. It was before Andy had integrated the V class, and but around that time I met Andy, and we quickly became friends. I feel like we have a similar background, albeit a little different, but we have Doc Watson prevalent in our background, and
yeah,
and
sure.
so I feel like there's a lot of that influence that I hear in Andy's guitars or anything that Andy's had a part of, and so it wasn't long after I met him that he sent me a prototype of the Grand Pacific, and obviously loved that guitar, and I loved when that guitar came out in its full form a few years later, and I played those for a while. And it's one great thing that I'm very thankful for is that I've been able to sort of garner a nice collection of guitars, and I have some Gibsons and obviously a lot of Martins and Martin-esque guitars, um, and so having said that, I've played a lot of guitars,
Hmm.
and I know at this point I know what I like in a guitar. I know what I don't like.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of guitars, most that I've played that have always been like, this is a great guitar, but and there's always a few things that I necessarily don't like. But kind of fast forward to I guess last year when the first gold label came out.
Hmm.
I just remember hearing a video of it and being impressed by the tone,
Hmm.
and so I just reached out to Taylor, and it's like I'd love to try one of those gold labels, and so I
Hmm.
tried, even though that body shape is not particularly what I would gravitate towards
Hmm.
mostly, for flat picking. I was instantly sort of blown away, and there was something in it that just was already inspiring. And then, of course, talked to Andy, and he says, I'm working on the Grand Pacific version of that. I would love to have you try it out. And that guitar, like another abnormal thing for me is I do have a bunch of guitars, and when I tour, I'll just take whatever guitar is inspiring me that week will be the guitar I'll take on the road, So
Hmm.
I never toured with the same guitar for very long. And that guitar it just never left the road. Like I would take it out and play it, and I loved it. And so I remember having the conversation with Andy about it, and then that became the uh, well, how about a signature model? Wouldn't that be great? And it's obviously jumped at that. And the problem was it was going to be a Grand Pacific at first, and I had no real improvements that I could make to it, that or any complaints that I could say about that guitar that I would change, which is not a great place to be for a signature guitar. It's like, well, I could do it, but it'll just be the same thing with my name on it, and I'm not sure that that's all that cool. So anyway, the somebody brought up a square shoulder version of it, and
Yep.
instantly I was kind of like, yeah, that's it. That's what I want to do different. And I just didn't think they would do a square shoulder because, I know the 810, I know the Legacy model came out last year,
Hmm.
but the square shoulder hasn't been in Taylor's roster for a while. And so when they talked about a 510, Andy instantly built a prototype and just loved it. And so I was like, yeah, that's it. That's going to be my guitar. And yeah, I'm thrilled with it. Obviously, it's a little different than what maybe a bluegrass person would expect. But I think once you hear the guitar, it stands on its own merits. You know, it's a monster guitar. I love it. You know, and I think everybody that will give it a chance and play it is going to love it.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like you're getting something out of the square shouldered design that you weren't getting out of the slope shouldered design? Is it more an aesthetic, or do you feel like there's a tonal thing that you're getting now that you're happier with?
It's for me, it's all tone. You know, I love the aesthetic of. Having said that, I love the aesthetic of a square shoulder guitar. Not that I don't, you know, love a good round shoulder guitar, but the square shoulder is just historically what I've always played, what bluegrass has been built on, you know. And so obviously there's that part of it that I really enjoy. And then also, you know, if you add just a tiny bit more of that guitar, you get a little bit more volume, you get a little bit more punch. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit more bass response in a square shoulder that you're kind of missing with the slope shoulder. It's, you know, it's different flavors of ice cream. There's no bad version of it. It's just, you know, different. And so I personally, you know, gravitate towards the square shoulder for that reason.
If you could name like a few little pieces of criteria, like what is it that you're looking for that makes a great guitar a great one, as opposed to being just okay, or like a little bit more garden variety?
You know, it's multi-leveled. Obviously there's that initial tone, you know, when you first pick up a guitar, how well balanced it is. You know, like for me, bass response is a big thing. I've grown up hearing these guitars that are boomy and big and loud, and so that's always something I look for, you know, from the first moment that I play guitar. And then once you sort of get past that, like I'll just typically play, like when I first pick up a guitar, it's always kind of the same. Like I always want to hear that low E. That's my favorite part of a guitar, and if it doesn't sound good, then I can put the guitar up, and you know, and so that's the instant things like that. And then obviously playability plays a big part of it. You know, it's like I want a guitar that's going to resonate well all over the fretboard. There's a good quote I heard from David Greer one time when I was playing with him, that he said something to a guitar maker that said, you know, I use all the fretboard. You know, it's like it's got to all sound good, and you know, for what I do, it's like, yeah, every spot on the guitar neck needs to sound good and needs to have this same punch that the low E's got, and not all of them do. You know, some of them sound really great in that register, and then when you start moving up and getting to the higher strings, it loses a little bit of that sparkle.
I want to get a couple more really important questions in here that have to do with metal, because I know there's a little bit of a kinship here, and we don't always get to dig deep on this with other bluegrass guitar players. Real quick, rank the pre-Black Album Metallica records in order of 1 to 4. What are your favorites?
Ride the Lightning has got to be top for me.
Okay.
Master of Puppets, I don't know. I go through spells where I like Master of Puppets more than Ride the Lightning, but I would Ride the Lightning. It's top. That one is top tier for me. Then Master of Puppets, Justice for All. I love it. I got the same complaints as everybody else. It'd be great to hear the bass on the record, but you know, it's a great record. I mean, that's one. I think I would put it a little bit higher. It would probably be above Master if it sonically was a little bit better. You know, and honestly, I kind of threw shade at the first one a little bit, but damn, it's a good record. Like it's got some cool stuff on it, you know, and all 4 of them, like you could throw them on at any point, and I'm happy, you know. But it's still, Ride the Lightning is like, that might be one of my desert island records, you know.
There's a lot of arguments in our back office here at the Music Emporium about this very question. Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets. It's you can never choose. Although I think I would agree that you just press play on Ride the Lightning, and once the guitar comes in on Fight fire with fire. I mean, the argument is almost ended just right there every time.
Yeah, it's done, man. I just that record is one, and I like if anybody ever asks what the relationship to bluegrass and metal is, I
It's
think
hilarious that you brought that up because guess what I was just about to ask you.
that one is like that record. My introduction was Iron Maiden, and I don't even know how I got into Iron Maiden. I do know I'm from Johnson City, Tennessee, or Jonesboro, and there used to be this really cool CD shop that this guy that worked there was just the best, and he knew my kind of fascination with music, and he introduced me to so much cool stuff from, you know, I'd never heard of Led Zeppelin before going in there, you know, and he's like, you're a guitar player and you don't know Jimmy Page, you need to hear this band, you know, and all this really cool metal stuff, and, you know, Marty Friedman with Megadeth, but he, I guess, was, you know, sort of my introduction, and I don't know if he just had, you know, an Iron Maiden record on, you know, most likely Number of the Beast was just on in the shop that day, and I bought the record, and to me the guitar playing is so akin. It's not the same, obviously not the same notes, it's not what I would choose to play on Blackberry Blossom, but there are these sort of things that are like, I think it's the intensity, like, especially that you know, that band, you can hear a lot of this intensity that translates well. And I always think thrash metal in general, like, you know, those early Metallica records, Slayer, you know, that there's several instances on the first couple of Slayer records where it's like, take away the screaming and put this on acoustic guitars, and this would kind of be bluegrass, you know. And it's a hard sell. I mean, my parents are very tried and true bluegrass country fans, and I don't put on Slayer too often if I'm ever riding with them, but I think, you know, it's like you can kind of hear it.
Yeah. It does get looks. I mean, yeah, you should see the amount of people that walk through the Music Emporium and hear us playing, you know, Raining Blood in the back or something. They're like, what is that going on back there? But I don't know. I think the camps might be coming closer together than they ever have before for just the reason that you outlined right there. So
yeah, I think it's, you know, people with big ears will find, you know, ways to incorporate things. I mean, it's like, I always think Tony Rice, you know, he got so many people into jazz, myself included. You know, I remember going to see him live, and he kicked off the show with a Jimmy Martin song, and then the next song was My Favorite Things. And he said, after, it was like a 10-minute version, you know, and the first thing he said to the crowd was, that first song was a Jimmy Martin song, and the second one was by John Coltrane. And I went the next day, and at the time, I think it was like the 50th anniversary of Kinda Blue. That's the only thing that this shop had that had Coltrane's name on it, and I hated that record. Like, I was expecting John Coltrane to be this amazing bluegrass guitar player, and it wasn't that, you know. But then later on, it's like, this is great. This is, and I get the relationship, you know. And it just took a few years to let it soak in, and, you know, you sort of have to let your ears develop. So, give Slayer a chance.
Give Slayer a chance. Come on. All right, man. I'm gonna hit you with one more kind of rapid fire question here.
Yeah, man.
We got a time crunch coming on here. Sometimes when we do these little interview thingies at the Emporium, we close with a little bit that we took from a Lyle Lovett song called "Step Inside This House." I think it's actually a Guy Clark song, but Lyle Lovett's the only one who's ever recorded it. Where you hear the narrator kind of describing the belongings in his house, and you kind of get to know the person based on their description of their favorite book, their favorite guitar that they have hanging on the wall, their favorite little kind of artifact from their travels that they have in the house, and then their favorite picture that they have hanging on the wall. So, real quick, can we get Trey's favorite picture you have hanging on the wall in your house, your favorite book? Guitar on the wall, we say, like, what's your beater guitar? Like, what's the guitar that you just have hanging on the wall that you kind of don't really care that much about, but still has sentimental value? And then, like, what's a cool Trey Hensley, like, item from your travels or artifact, if you can remember all that, and just give us rapid fire answers.
All right, so let's see. I'll start with favorite picture on the wall. There's a picture of me and my wife and daughter that's downstairs. And most of the time, I don't necessarily like, you know, when you go have your picture made somewhere, and it's the stage thing. But we went, it was, I guess, when we lived in Nashville, and my daughter was really small, and we had our picture made right next to the Cumberland River. And of course, as she was, it was just, they have this little beached area where like kids would go play in the water, and but we were just kind of having our pictures made on the rocks there by that little area, and my daughter, of course, gets in the water and it's just absolutely soaked and wet, and it was totally not, we'd paid to have their pictures made, not anticipating that we were all going to be absolutely soaked. And so that one, I always love that picture, And then it's kind of tied with some newer stuff, of us at the Grammys. We got to go to the Grammys this year, and that's just pretty hard to beat.
That's pretty cool.
Just the opportunity to be there with them. We won a Grammy, which is awesome. It's great to have that down there. But the trip, getting to go to the slime factory with my daughter was equally as fun as winning a Grammy. So that's a cool picture. It's funny because my favorite book is probably one that I wouldn't recommend to a lot of people. I love Charles Bukowski, and I've read Post Office probably 10 times. I love that. I mean, there's some Hemingway stuff that I really dig. Obviously got into For Whom the Bell Tolls. I like that one a lot. I went down the classics road pretty hard, but I still kind of pick sort of that trilogy of Bukowski records. I would probably put Post Office first. That's typically my favorite. What was it? Oh, the favorite guitar. That's a good question. I don't have like a good beater guitar. I was trying to think. You know what? There's an old. I don't even know what it is. I don't know if it's a K or a Harmony from the 40s. That's kind of like a, just a good sit around the house beater. I've got it. The nut has a piece of tape on it, so that tells you what kind of guitar it is. But it's a great like couch. It's a small body guitar. It's a great little couch. Play around.
Yep.
If I needed to go to a campfire, I would grab that guitar.
Yep.
Not to burn, but to play for the.
Oh yeah, no, that's exactly the kind of thing that we're thinking of. So that's cool.
I forgot what was the last question.
Oh, and then just like any like a thing that you might have gathered in your travels, or like an artifact in your house, or like just something that is sitting on the shelf that has particular sentimental value to you.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. There's one. There's a. It's not mine. I bought it for my daughter, but when I played in France a few years ago when she was probably 1 or 2. And it was a town called La Roche, and I was just walking around before the show, and I just happened into like a little toy shop that the guy had made all these toys, and he had put together this little stuffed rabbit. And that was her favorite toy forever. I mean, it was from France. I think she nicknamed it Pierre Cottontail. So she carried that thing around. It's like stuffing coming out of it, and that's pretty cool. And then I think on that same trip I was somewhere, and this guy gave me a finger puppet of Django Reinhardt, which is just the most random thing ever. And it's sitting over next to my guitar stuff, and it's like I'll never fail to smile at that, just for pure absurdity of making a Django Reinhardt finger puppet.
Yeah,
that's whoever made that. It's my kind of person.
That's hilarious. All right, Trey, I know you have to go, so we're going to let you get out of here. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks so much for chatting about your guitar, and we'll hope to see you down the road real soon.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much.